So this is Acts chapter 22, the scripture for June 16th. Having been given an opportunity to testify, Paul does exactly that. With a hostile crowd demanding his arrest, Paul somehow gathers the courage to share the message of the gospel with them. Throughout the next several chapters, Paul is going to testify not only before crowds, but also before rulers, before the Sanhedrin, before kings. In all of this in an effort to help them understand and confess that Jesus is the Messiah. Paul isn't just doing this because, well, he feels like it. He's doing it because he's been given the position to do it. It's fascinating, I think, to see which parts of his story he highlights as he talks to different types of people and to different audiences. It's similar to the lesson I think Paul may have learned or may have deployed in Athens when he began with holding a common ground with the Areopagus and with the Athenians listening to him. Paul wants to give people an opportunity to track with the story he's telling. Paul doesn't just want to dunk on people, as it were. Paul wants folks to really believe in Jesus and to be brought along in this story. For example, with this hostile crowd, Paul doesn't start the same way that Peter started in Acts 2 with, this Jesus whom you killed. Instead, Paul starts by saying, hey, I'm a Jew. I studied at the feet of Gamaliel. You may remember Gamaliel from Acts chapter 5. He was the voice in the Sanhedrin who suggested, hey, let's not be too hasty here. If God is working through these apostles, we might find ourselves working against God. He also emphasizes his persecution of Christians, known at that time as the Way. He knows this is something the crowd can understand, so like in Athens, he leads with this common ground. So after capturing the attention of the crowd by gaining their sympathy, basically suggesting, I'm not that different from you, I'm not this demonic character that I'm being cast as, Paul begins to recount the events of Acts chapter 9 when he was converted on the road to Damascus. Some of the details of his conversion don't match the narrative that Luke gave us earlier in Acts precisely, but the gist of the conversion is the same. But this is the first time, though, that readers hear about the vision that Paul had in the Jerusalem temple. And this is a big deal, and this is where the crowd begins to turn on him. Because Jesus, in this vision, commands Paul, go to the Gentiles. And for the Messiah, or who we claim is the Messiah, who Paul claimed is the Messiah at that time, to command Paul in the temple to go to the Gentiles, that was too much for Paul's Jewish hearers. It was too much desecration of the temple. It understandably causes a ruckus. This vision went directly against the crowd's conception of what their faith ought to look like and what their temple was about. Now, as an aside, I want to say that when we find ourselves wanting to defend our faith, we can be positive that we made a wrong turn somewhere. Because God doesn't need us to defend the faith. And the faith, while we've been grafted into this faith, it's not our possession. God has graciously invited us into relationship. This is something that we get belonging in, but it's not our faith that needs to be defended by us. So we know we've lost the thread somewhere if we start finding ourselves really needing to defend the faith against those who might profane it. The Tribune, had planned to beat the truth out of Paul, flogging in order to encourage him to say something. But at the last minute, Paul lets the Tribune know, hey, I'm a Roman citizen. I have some rights here. And not only was Paul a citizen, Paul was a citizen by birth, which is a big deal. This it not only shows the privileges that a Roman citizen has here, but it also shows to the early readers of the Acts of the Apostles that being Roman, fully and truly Roman, and being Christian were not in contradiction to one another. It shows that the gospel truly is not a cultural possession. Now I wonder, when have you felt like you've needed to defend God's honor? That's all for Acts chapter 22. Tomorrow, the 17th of June, we'll be looking at Acts chapter 23. May God bless you in your reading of Scripture.